Perfectly, perfectly. I'm impressed. You got inside without problems. Well, I introduce you, Roger Kaufman, Bob Woodson.
Bob, it's an honor and a pleasure to meet you.
I'm delighted to meet you as well.
Yeah, I followed you for years and years, and which makes me suspect, of course. But I really appreciate your objectivity and your incisive logic, and so thank you for what you're doing for all of us.
Well, thank you. It's a fascinating time.
It is.
It required revolutionary patience.
Well,
good term.
Yes, sir. Well, as I told you before, the Kaufman Award has been created to distinguish those who provide reliable, measurable social impact and promote what we call societal performance, which is turning social capital in something positive that can impact what Roger describes as the mega level, which is the ideal vision, the kind of world we want for our children. And from there, we derive useful indicators, one of which is self-sufficiency, self-reliance, and that is precisely one of the reasons why when it was Roger who made me notice your work, and then I went into the website and said, well, I think this is a very good case for our award, for our 2020 award that is going to be delivered in 2021. So, but Roger, tell more about what your concept is.
Well, first, in truth, and if I cough, I'm sorry. I'm in Tallahassee, Florida, which is the allergy capital of the universe. So not only is my name Kaufman, but I live up to it. When this award was created, they wisely said that I had no input into the final decision on who gets it. But I know Mariano well enough that he was open to suggestion, and it seems to me what you're doing aligns very well with my life's work, what I call mega planning, where the primary client and beneficiary of anything any organization, individual, or group does is adding value to our shared society. And the rough indicators are survival, self-sufficiency, quality of life. And one of the indicators of success that we might not get to in our lifetime, but we've moved forward to, is that nobody will be under the care, custody, or control of another person, agency, or substance. I really believe that if that's going to happen, it's going to be up to individuals and to people, and not up to external agencies. And so mega planning, I've managed to bore people with about 41 books on the topic and a bunch of articles. And Mariano's work with the PII Global Institute is adding his expertise to this. And frankly, we just want to change the world, nothing more, nothing less. And it's going to take leaders who have credibility to be exemplars of what this is and how to do it. And so that's why I brought your name to the attention of Mariano, because I thought you're worthy of consideration for the award. The final decision is up to a rather elite, qualified group of people. But anyway, it's an honor to meet you, even if it's virtually, and to make my recommendation to Mariano and his selection board.
Well, I'm really flattered. Everything you said certainly resonates with how I have defined my life. And all of us have our reference group, and the reference groups that I have is the least of God's children.
Yes.
And I parted company with the civil rights movement in the 60s over the issue of race versus poverty. And,
Yes.
and I went because I realized when we opened the doors of opportunity, some people were not prepared to walk through the doors. As Dr. King said, what good does it is to have the right to live and eat where you choose if you don't have the means to exercise that right.
Absolutely.
And sometimes the means of doing it isn't always material.
Yeah. And I've done much work in the area of vocational and technical education, which are enablers. We had a commissioner of education in Florida who virtually closed down our vocational education program in Florida because she said that was not real education, and thus not allowing people to gain the skills, knowledge, and attitudes to go out and make a living and further themselves. My grandparents were immigrants. My mother's father came here. He started as a peddler with no money and a burlap bag, picking up junk and trying to renovate and resell what he could, and finally got to a push cart. And my father was the only person in the family to ever get a college degree. And so it's this kind of access that we can provide. But as you say, we also have to help people with the tools and the abilities and the motivators to get it done. That's just my bias.
Well, that's true. And again, all of my professional life, I've been fighting elitism, the assumption that if you're untutored, you're unwise and therefore unfit to make decisions on your own and for your own self. So I've been fighting against that.
And thank you for that fight. And it's getting kind of challenging these days, isn't it?
It really is, but I'm encouraged. I really am encouraged because as somebody said, that the sickest part of the body draws the strongest antibodies.
That's interesting. That's interesting. Thank you.
And so I find in the most troublesome places the greatest strengths, because people are not accustomed to looking there for it. And so so what we have spent our time doing, going into places that everyone said you shouldn't go, associating with people they say are hopeless, and pursuing cause that they say is worthless. And when you do achieve in those environments, the victory is so much sweeter.
It is, and what the work that Mariano and his people have been doing, literally all over the world, and most recently in Barrio 31 in Buenos Aires, is an example of exactly how that can be done. And it's not about money; it's about people. And,
well, I have one that I worked with back in the 80s. We worked with 60 Minutes for 3 months, and if you go on YouTube and Bertha Gilkey, Gilkey, 60 Minutes, you will see a 23-minute segment that chronicles how a group of residents of public housing in St. Louis were able to create an island of excellence in one of the most drug-ridden, crime-ridden neighborhoods around. It took us a few years to make that happen, but they were so successful that market rate housing was built right across from public housing.
interesting, fascinating. Congrats. Mariano, are you
Absolutely.
still with us?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
I'm checking as you spoke about 60 minutes. I was looking in the YouTube. I think it's
Bertha Gilkey, Gilkey.
Gilky. Okay,
Bertha Gilkey.
okay.
60 minutes.
Yes, I see it. I see it here.
Yes.
Yeah.
So there's an example where we've created about 3 or 4 models like that around the country, where over a 10 or 12-year period, we've created islands of excellence in places. Some of them were not sustained because there was resistance from the powers that be. But nevertheless, we demonstrated, in one case, 600 kids went from public housing to college. The teenage pregnancy rate was just about down to 0. So we've demonstrated over the years, but we could not attract anybody to come and evaluate it or to spend any time chronicling it. So I wrote about it, but not very many other people did.
I guess that gets in the way of some people's agendas, doesn't it?
It really does. And particularly when all of it is being done by untutored people who are not supposed to be agents of their own uplift.
Yes.
And so, but we treat these grassroots leaders like social entrepreneurs.
Exactly.
70% of the jobs in the economy are created by 3% of the people who are entrepreneurs, but entrepreneurs tend to be very poor bookkeepers.
Yeah.
So they need capital, but also they need managerial expertise. But also entrepreneurs tend to be C students, not A students.
Yeah. Yeah.
A students come back to universities and teach. C students come back and endow.
It's true. It's true.
Yeah, there was a study by David Birch at MIT that proved that.
Suspect, right?
Huh?
I said, my being a professor, I guess I'm suspect then, huh?
Yes, sir, you are. If you're an A student, you gotta prove yourself. You gotta demonstrate you can do something.
When Jeb Bush was governor, he used to see me and he said, "Roger, you're the only Jewish tenured full professor Republican in the system, aren't you?" And I said, "Yeah." And I said, "It's goddamn lonely."
It is true.
Can I bounce something off of you, Mr.
Sure.
Woodson? One of the things that's been rounding around in my head, and I've mentioned it to Mariano, is that I think probably 2 of the greatest pieces of advice we've gotten in the last 75 years. One was from Martin Luther King, who said, "These little children be not by the color of their skin, but the nature of their character." And
Right.
by John F. Kennedy in his inaugural speech said, "Ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country." And I think we've gone in the actually opposite direction from that.
Well, a lot of people, when they hold up the content of your character as a standard and they look at their own behavior, that's why they change. They want to switch back the color of your skin.
That's to make sure that
it's interesting. Yeah.
They can't meet the character standard. So
Exactly.
they retreat back to, no, judging by the color of my skin.
That's a great insight. That's a great insight. Thank you for that.
Great idea. Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I find it very, very interesting. I think that the area where you are working is critical in many ways. And as you said, from the group that is expected maybe to be in the worst condition can be more clarity about the difference between what pretends to be and what it really is. So the idea that people who are among those who are not supposed to be able to overcome, being able to overcome by themselves, I think that's a very interesting concept. We are working with slums in Buenos Aires that have been there for 80 years. And for during 80 years, people have done everything but trying to make people able to work. And for the last 4, they have been doing that, and the success is really remarkable. And it's incredible that such a simple concept has been so difficult to obtain. And people, talking with people who are in that situation, their leadership does exactly what you described. They hide behind their difficulty, their handicap. Like instead of letting people do what they can do, they basically, negotiate the lowest standard possible. And dependency is, of course, always a great midwife for corruption and for populism. So they always get something in that way. But interestingly, people respond much stronger to people who give them opportunities to work. We have an association which won this year's award called Pescar, who the reference in Spanish for fishing. And the idea is that instead of giving people fish, you give people a fishing rod. And the idea is they enable people to work, and they keep talking and calling people over 2-3 years to make sure that those who got a job or got back to school finish. And they have also obtained a lot of good results just basically by persistence and putting effort in individuals rather than collectives. So I found your concepts very, very interesting and attractive in that sense. And I was thinking, you mentioned that video, maybe that if we can get some other of these testimonies, that will be very interesting to put together, so we can foster the candidacy and really recognize this kind of work. I think it's very remarkable.
Yeah, because I really think pity is worse than bigotry.
Yes.
Yes.
Because I think it was Dietrich Bonhoeffer who the German theologian who was martyred in Hitler, he said the most difficult human phenomena to address is not malice, because you can confront malice with violence. It's folly. It's when someone thinks they're doing something to help you that's really hurting you.
Terrific.
Because
Yeah.
it's hard to convince a person with good intentions that what they're doing is harmful.
Yeah.
And so that is what, and I remember the only time I had any rural experience, I was invited by a group of people from Africa to come because they had come to visit me here and see what I was doing. And I went to Rhodesia,
Yep.
Zimbabwe, and I was visited in the village. And I was they wanted me to talk about entrepreneurship. And I said, well, what is it that you use and that you purchase that you can make yourself? So they all wore, the uniforms to school. I said, but where do you get them then? So what I did was arrange with the Singer sewing machine people who had a lot of mechanical sewing machines in storehouses to ship some of them to the village so the women can make their own uniforms. And they use candles that are really poor quality. So we go to a Dutch company and get paraffin shipped in so they can be taught to make quality candles that burn for a long time as a business. So when you talk to people and then enable them to obtain the means to exercise this, it's amazing how a few of them grab a hold of it, and once they're given the opportunity, then they began to, and then it becomes self-fulfilling. Other people began to suggest other things that they purchase, that they use, that they can produce themselves. But it starts here by coming in with the expectation that people got agency and capacity.
Exactly.
If you don't believe it, you will never expect it.
Yes, and you'll live up to those negative expectations.
Yes. I would
Or live
rather have higher expectations than to meet, and rather than coming with lower.
Yep.
Exactly. It's a very important concept that cannot be emphasized enough. But your work is a way to emphasize, because we encourage people to look for results rather than rhetoric, and the idea that persistence over time creates a track record, and the track record reverses the course of history, or at least of a personal history that sometimes is not encouraging. But if people, I mean, if we keep trying in the right way, people first realize that you are serious about it, that you are really going to do it. They are not going to see you, for one time and then you never come back. And I think that's really important. And the idea that things can be achieved by trusting and setting goals that are higher than what is it like, as opposed to lowering the standards so everybody can get there. I think that it will be very interesting. I know that you have people working with you. Can you tell us more about the current work? What kind of things are you working on now?
Well, what we're working on now is really pushing back against the assault against the culture that is coming from the New York Times and the 1619 Project, where Nicole Hannah-Jones just received a Pulitzer for a fictional description of American history, where she said America is defined from his real birthday is 1690, the day that the first slaves came here from Africa. And therefore, since half of the founders who wrote the Declaration of Independence were slave owners, therefore the documents that they penned was wrong. And America, racism is in its DNA. And the other fiction is that the problems facing Black America today are related to the legacy of slavery and discrimination. And so what I have done, since they have brought together a group of Black journalists and artists and whatnot, I've countered that by bringing together a leadership of 20 to 30 Black scholars and community activists and business leaders. But we are also, like the Civil Rights Coalition, it's led by Blacks, but participated in by everybody. Yeah. And so we've collected a series of essays. We are not going to challenge them in a debate. We want to offer an aspirational and an inspirational alternative. So if she says that, and they say that capitalism is evil and is racist, while they work at the New York Times.
Yes.
And who's supported by advertising from capitalist companies, which is interesting. But so what we have done is that we challenge them we have some historians will challenge them on the facts.
Yeah.
But we think that the way you challenge is to demonstrate to people. There are 20 blacks, for instance, who were born slaves who died millionaires.
Interesting.
There was also
So
wasn't
what
it-
we're doing is we're telling the stories from history and how people prevailed. People should be defined by their resilience and their opposition to slavery and oppression. As I tell people, real champions in sports are defined by people who score in the face of opposition.
Exactly. Exactly.
And so we have now accumulated, we have a website, it's called 1776unites.com.
Okay.
I visited that. Let me ask you a question. It sounds like what they've done is they have endowed us with original sin from which
Yes.
there's no recovery.
Right.
And that's almost a religious kind of anointment. And from that, you can't recover, can you? If
No,
you believe that?
So can you imagine, this is a poisonous message that's going out in every 50 states. The Pulitzer Institution has created school curriculum based upon this anti-American narrative. And so we are offering alternative curriculum that celebrates 1776. We're coming out with shirts and caps and lapel pins. We are developing a school curriculum that celebrates the founding. And we give examples of how people thrive. And we answer, why are people of color risking their lives to get here if what we are is so bad?
Exactly.
Exactly.
And so
Yeah.
it's we only been in business about 8 months, but we're really gaining momentum really fast. And we're developing, since we don't have their money, they have a $2 million ad at the Super Bowl and at the Oscars condemning America.
Where are they getting their money?
We have, businesses, foundations, progressive foundations, the Ford Foundation, Rockefeller, Carnegie, all of them are pouring money into this anti-American. So we have to, we can't compete there. So we must engage in disruptive innovation. So we have some outstanding stories that we think will go viral. And so we've got a raising money now for that. And so we're enjoying the fight. It's a David and Goliath.
Well, we know how that ends.
And we know how that one ends.
Exactly.
In the 1619 project, did they mention that there were black slaveholders?
Oh, no. They never mentioned Frederick Douglass or Dr. King either. He's not mentioned in it.
Really?
Wow.
No, they didn't mention it. They don't
really,
talk about the Civil War.
That's really revisionist history, isn't it?
The small
Oh,
lap.
yeah. They cherry picked.
My goodness. But yeah, that's really, I was thinking what you mentioned about recognizing those who are really challenging the stereotypes, you know? And as opposed to those who try to use the stereotypes to put one people against another. Like the idea that, you know, we should have a special treatment because we are special, meaning we are not as good as other people.
Exactly.
You know?
And that's the pity
we are not
part.
as smart, we are not as entrepreneurial. So and taking that invitation is really taking a bait. But it's very interesting. What we try to do with the Kaufman Award is precisely showcasing examples of the best of us. So a lot of people told Roger for many, many years that, you know, Mega, doing good and doing well were opposites. So you cannot make money by treating, you know, by investing in the community or by developing or by catering to poor people. You have to cater, only Cadillacs, only, for the 1%. And for a long time, Roger was kind of a pariah. However, over the long time, things are going now to show that, of course, they are not opposites. They are requisites. You cannot do well without doing good. If your customer doesn't do well, it's not too long until you have the same fate. So this idea is a little one of the things that is important, because if we look at the Black community, Latino community, whichever immigrant community, if we look at the immigrant as someone who's disenfranchised and disempowered and powerless, well, basically, each bit of help we give these people is not going to work, because we are encouraging a reactive behavior as opposed to a proactive behavior.
And a victimhood mentality.
Yeah.
Nothing as I've said, people are motivated to prove themselves when you show them victories that are possible, not injuries to be avoided.
Yes.
And so that's what we are doing. We have some amazing stories to tell that from history that people don't know. There was a man, Robert Smalls, who was born in slavery in 1834, and he was working on the river in South Carolina as a deckhand, and his master trusted him. And a Friday night he went in town. Well, he commandeered the boat and picked up his wife and the families of the crew and sailed past all of the garrisons by putting on his master's hat and waving. And then he turned the ship over to the Union Navy. And as a result of that, Congress gave him a $1,500 reward and made him an officer in the Navy. And he went around speaking on behalf of the Union, and it persuaded Lincoln to let blacks fight in the Civil War. After it was over, during Reconstruction, he became a successful businessman and member of Congress and purchased the plantation on which he was a slave. And took in the family of the slave master that had become destitute.
Oh.
Fascinating.
Wow.
Is that amazing story? And listen to this very special godly man. The wife of the slave master had become delusional at the time, was mentally ill, and thought that she still owned the plantation. So he let her sleep in the master bedroom till she died.
Wow. That's something.
Is that grace in action?
Absolutely.
It is.
So that's a major. So there are countless other stories like that of grace in action. So if somebody who was born a slave could take in the family of the slave master, how can some black with a PhD from Harvard be pissed off at anybody today for anything?
Because they screw up the narrative.
Exactly. So they don't want those kind of stories told, but we're going to tell them.
That's great.
I will be happy to communicate those and to spread this alternative vision of, when I say alternative vision, I say that it's hard to tell that reality is an alternative. But
yes.
People took the other way. So they try to, the idea that slavery is intrinsic to the United States is the same like greed is intrinsic to capitalism, not to socialism, just to capitalism. And that these kind of concepts can be only fought with facts, as you said, with the stories of real people. Is there any descendant? Are there any descendants of this person?
Yes,
Oh,
we have descendants. In fact, one of them is a part of our consortium. On both sides, we have Julius Rosenwald, the man who partnered with Booker T. Washington to build 5,000 Rosenwald schools in the South. He put up half the money in the Black community. He put up 4.6 million, and the Black community raised the match. They matched it, and they created their own bricks, and as a result, there are more Rosenwald schools in the South, rural South, than there are McDonald's today.
That's amazing.
And as a result of Julius Rosenwald and those schools, the Blacks were able to close the education gap between 1920 and 1940 from 3 years to 6 months. And now his great grandson's wife is a part of our consortium. She wrote the book on Julius Rosenwald.
oh, excellent, excellent.
I guess
And
us,
Booker T.
us Dan-
Washington's great granddaughter is also there.
I guess us damn Jews have made trouble forever, huh?
Huh? That's right.
I
they
guess
did.
us damn Jews have made trouble forever.
That's right. But the Sears store, the Sears stores in the South.
Well,
at the
maybe
time-
you can unravel.
But because of Rosenwald,
Yeah.
the Sears stores were the only ones that hired Blacks.
Oh, okay. Oh, interesting.
And
I cannot avoid it.
And because of the catalogs, Blacks could shop for the same quality as goods as anybody else. You know, so
Interesting.
so it was just, so there's some amazing stories to be told.
I think it's really, really interesting.
That's fascinating. Let me be imposing. If you would be interested in reading some of the stuff that Mariano and I have produced, let us know. If you have trouble
No, I would
with
love to.
insomnia, that
I'm an
would
avid
work
reader.
well.
So please do.
But if you'd like to see some of the stuff, especially, okay, Mariano, do you have his email? Yeah.
Yes, I do.
Email?
Yes.
Mariano? Okay. You two have a lot to talk about because of the nature of the actual projects, Mariano, that you're doing.
Yes.
And I think there's such a wonderful intersection that it's rather remarkable, and I appreciate being schooled today. So thank you.
Oh,
Well, thank you. I've enjoyed this.
I think it's great. What I'm going to do, Bob, is, of course, I will email you asking with copying Roger, asking you for some of this information we spoke.
Sure.
I think it will be very interesting if we can make a either an article piece from you for our review about exactly this idea of the real history of the Black entrepreneur. I'm personally an amateur historian, and I'm particularly interested in the history of business. And I think this is an interesting combination that show how the preconcepts or the stereotypes have basically erased a very important part of the history of a community. In the case of,
Yes.
you know, a Black community, and make them feel uncomfortable in the country they built, which is kind of being myself a first-generation immigrant. And they told me, what country are you from? I said, well, I was I was born in Argentina, so I'm Argentinian by birth. I'm Spanish by heritage. My father was born and is buried in Spain, but I'm American by choice. Okay, when someone in 2008 became an American citizen, and I was unaware. I went there. They asked me several questions, and one of them was, "Would you accept to defend with arms the United States?" And the guy said, "Of course, it would be a honor." And the guy looked at me like, "Are you crazy?" No, it was like it was a question to say, "No, actually, I'm against violence or war or whatever," which in general I am, but I have no doubt about it. That which side I would be with if I come to a country, I want to be a citizen, pay taxes. Of course, I'm going to take my share. But anyway, I was surprised. The other thing I was surprised when I got my citizenship was, do you want to keep your last name? Believe me, Bob, it's the only country in the world when you can say who you are, define it as many times as you want. It's important for people who come from places where slavery and all bad things happen. The idea that you can start from scratch, you can be a Jan Valjean. What you mentioned about this black person reminded me of Zola, the guy who comes from the gallows and ends in a respectable position, changing society. You know, so the idea that these stories that show that immigrants can be and you can trace your own destiny, and actually that African Americans or Black Americans have really built this country, and they're part of it. There is no other place where they belong to.
No, we have what we call, Durham, I wrote a book back in the 80s. It's called On the Road to Economic Freedom, and it's a short history of blacks in business.
Oh, wow.
And a colleague of mine is the premier scholar in the country on the history of blacks in business. And his name is John Sibley Butler at University of Texas at Austin. He is the premier, he's a part of our consortium. He's the premier expert on the history of blacks in business. He is interesting too, because he is a third generation PhD.
Well,
his grandmother was an MD.
Okay.
Interesting.
And his grandmother was an MD at the turn of the century. And John describes himself as the truly advantage of the disadvantaged.
Yes, third generation, my goodness.
Can you educate me on another thing? I'm taking advantage of you. It seems to me that in many ways, what liberal programs are trying to do is to reintroduce people into a different kind of slavery.
Yes.
And is that any validity to that?
No, it is true. It is the worst kind of slavery, because slavery was external and the other kind is internal. There's nothing worse when you internalize, when you believe that your future rests upon what somebody who is your enemy subscribes for you to do. That's mental slavery. It's very difficult to break. This is just very. So that's what I fight against.
Great.
At least a bigotry is external. But when the bigotry is within yourself,
it's more insidious.
You have self-doubt.
Yeah.
So, Dr. King said it another way. And it was another historian. He said, if you condition a person to enter into the back door, even if there is no back door, they'll demand that you build one.
Wow,
Exactly.
that's great.
So,
So,
Well-
so that's what I fight against all the time. Trying to free people from the chains that are inside.
exactly.
That's a difficult chore. A lot of people who walk around angry at white people, man.
Yes.
That's a tip off.
Yeah.
That's something that's missing within them. So, but I fight that all the time. But I welcome the challenge.
And thank you for doing it, not only for me, but millions of other people who now appreciate it and in the future will appreciate it. So thank you for doing it.
Well, thank you and for this opportunity.
I think I've taken enough of you, both of your time. Is there anything else?
No, Roger, I just wanted to introduce you, and
Okay.
I will continue
I
with
would-
Bob, and
I would,
we will continue later. Okay? Thank you.
Okay.
fine. Let me sign off for now, and thank
Sure.
you so
I think you're fading anyway.
for
Yeah,
including
exactly.
this,
I think that
and thank you so much for the continuing education.
All right. Thank you.
Roger. Take care.
All right. Bye.
Okay, Bob. I will call you, and I will send you an email with references so we can exchange that and get you ready for the award nomination. Okay.
Okay. Good.
It will be my pleasure. Really, I enjoy very much this conversation. I hope we have opportunity to help others.
Well, please, anytime. All right.
Wonderful, Bob.
I'll send you a
really
copy
appreciate
of my book as well.
it. Thank you. Thank you.
All righty.
Take care.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Okay, Mariana, I'm trying to figure out how to get out of this.
Well, I'm closing the meeting, so that will
Okay.
be one way.
I'm impressed. Are you?
I am. I think we found a guy who's really walks the talk.